Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name's Kaylee and today we have a Kindle Unlimited check-in. So I think a lot of people do this, but I saw this video on Melissa's channel and she will be linked below. But basically this is going to be a new quarterly video that I do. So every 4 months on my channel, I'm going to check in and talk about the books that I've read on Kindle Unlimited in this past quarter, and then talk about what books I have checked out on Kindle Unlimited. So basically talking about what I've read and what my immediate TBR is. Now, because I've never done one of these videos before, I have a lot of books to talk about, so I'm just gonna go over what my favorites have been on Kindle Unlimited so far. Kindle Unlimited is a relatively new thing for me. I discovered it maybe about a year ago now, but really in the past like 6 months is when I've been deep diving into the romance on there, and just recently diving into more fantasy and horror on Kindle Unlimited. Kindle Unlimited, in case you don't know what it is just a monthly fee that you can pay, and then you have access to a bunch of self-published and indie books along with some traditionally published books as well on there. And you're able to check out up to 20 books onto your Kindle, so have them downloaded on your Kindle. And then beyond then, you have to return books, and then you can check out more again. I used to just read Kindle books on my phone too, but I just recently got this little Kindle, it's not a Kindle actually, Amazon Fire tablet. I got it for my birthday, and let me tell you, the difference between reading on my phone and reading on this much bigger screen is huge. I feel like whenever I'm reading a book on this screen, I'm able to get through books so quickly. Like, it's been incredible. Highly recommend trying out someone's Kindle or someone's tablet if you're used to reading on your phone. Just see what you're missing, because that's what I did. I went home to visit my family and my mom had one of these, and I tried out reading on it and I was like, okay, I need one. So I'm just gonna be opening up the Kindle app on here just so I can see what I have been reading recently and talk you through which ones have been my favorites so far. As I mentioned before, I have been reading mostly romance on here. I tend to go towards dark romance and fantasy romance. However, I have been also recently, like I said, reading just fantasy and horror books as well. So I guess I will start with talking about the romances, and this romance genre is also going to include fantasy romances. So my favorites so far have been the Twisted series by Anna Huang. I've read the first 3 books in this Twisted series. I gave the first one 4 stars, but it was really more like a 3.5. But then I gave the next 2 books 5 stars. So the Twisted series, you've probably heard about it. It's really popular for a great reason. Each book follows a different girl in this group of friends. I would recommend reading them in order. I know a lot of people haven't read them in order, but I feel like I've gained a lot more from the story from reading them in order and having like the full backstory before going into the next book. Sorry, my dog is trying to jump up on the chair right now. There he goes. And each book has kind of different tropes going on. So the first book is Brother's Best Friend, and Grumpy Sunshine and billionaire romance as well. The second book is Princess Bodyguard and Forbidden. The third book is Best Friend's Brother and Hate to Love. And then I don't know what the fourth one is because I haven't read it yet. I really need to read it though. And then another favorite is the Plated Prisoner series. This is a fantasy romance, and I have read Gild, Glint, and Gleam. Have not yet read Gold. As I'm saying this, I just realized it's not on Kindle Unlimited anymore. I did read it on Kindle Unlimited. That's why I originally am talking about it in this video, but it's no longer on Kindle Unlimited. So sorry, I do have Glow downloaded on my Kindle Unlimited still, and it's never going away now. But yeah, it's a really good fantasy romance, much more slow burn. Like, the romance doesn't even really start until book 3. So this isn't on Kindle Unlimited, but I would recommend checking out these books still if you're able to acquire them anywhere. And my other top favorite for romance has been the Mind F series by St. Abbey. These are 5 books, and they're all quite short. They're all ranging from like 90 pages to 200 pages, depending on the book. I read them all back to back, like pretty much in a day. I think it was 2 days I read them all. I was originally just going to read the first book, and I had to drop everything and read all 5 because they were amazing. So this is about a female serial A female serial killer that falls in love with the FBI agent that is currently investigating her serial killing crimes. It is amazing, and while this is dark, obviously, because it's about a serial killer and things get dark, for all of these romances, definitely check trigger warnings. I'm not going to say that for every single one, but check trigger warnings for all of the romances I'm talking about. I like dark romances, so all of these have a lot of trigger warnings in them. But the Mind F series is dark, obviously, but the romance isn't like super, super dark. I don't know. I'm saying that because now I've read other serial killer romances, and those things, the romances have been much darker than this serial killer romance. Like, this is one of those serial killer vibes where it's like, yeah, she's a serial killer, but she has a reason. You know, you kind of root for her. So it's not like there's any of the love interests is like straight up evil in this story. Another favorite that I've read is Pestilence. This is a fantasy romance. It's basically about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse coming in to kill off mankind, and about women falling in love with them. So Pestilence is about Pestilence, the 4 horsemen, and each book in the series is about a different one. I've only read Pestilence. I need to read the next one, that's War. But Pestilence was a lot of fun. I had an amazing time reading it. And I would say that the fantasy in this fantasy romance, you know, it's not like we're in a fantasy world. It's just, it's almost more apocalyptic romance than fantasy romance, if that makes sense. And then lastly, of the romances I've read that have been favorites, I would say Song of the Marked. This is another fantasy romance, but this is much more on the fantasy side of fantasy romance, kind of more like the Plated Prisoner series. And this is a story about this fantasy world where there's this plague going through this kingdom, and the king is trying to figure out what's going on. He sends his captain of the guard to go off and investigate these weird magical plague phenomenons with our main heroine character, because she is immune, and people don't really know why she is immune to this plague. And the romance is between her and the captain of the guard. There's villains in the story, there's very cool magic in the story. Our main female character is a badass. We get lots of cool fight scenes. The banter is delicious in the story. It's really good. I've only read book 1 though, and this is, I think, like a 4 or 5 books long series. So I'm still at the very beginning of the series, but I'm excited to continue. So to wrap up the romance section of this check-in, my favorites have been the Twisted series, the Mind F series, Song of the Marked, the Plated Prisoner series, and Pestilence. And this video would not be a complete video if I didn't mention Ice Planet Barbarians as well before I move on from the romance section, because I've read the first 2 books in the Ice Planet Barbarian section. Now, these are just purely entertaining stories. They're not like they're not that well written. There's a lot of unnecessary scenes that happen in it that could be triggering to a lot of people. I don't have those triggers, so they didn't, you know, put me off from the story, but I could see why a lot of people dislike these stories, because it is unnecessary. It's straight up unnecessary what happens at the beginning of Ice Planet Barbarians. But once you get past that, the love between the women and these aliens is actually quite, like, wholesome. There's a trope in there that I really love, which is trying to figure out how to communicate with aliens, a very nuanced trope, but I love it when humans are trying to figure out how to communicate with aliens. So I had a lot of fun with Ice Planet Barbarians, read the first 2, I'm excited to continue, but it didn't quite make it into like my favorites of the romances because the rest are, you know, objectively better. For the horror section of the video, my favorites so far, pretty quickly, I can just talk about Darcy Coates in general. Everything I've read from Darcy Coates has been 4 or 5 stars. I have read 5 or 6 books from her, so I'm not a Darcy Coates newbie, but I'm also not a Darcy Coates expert. I'm excited to continue on with her stories, though. My favorite so far has been The Carrow Haunt. And then the next horror books shout out is the Rewind or Die series. This is a series of 33 books, and before you're like, what the heck? These books are not related to each other. They are in a series, but they're not related in any way to each other, at least to my knowledge. I've read 2 of these books. I have read Neverland, Camp Neverland, and Cirque Berserk. and I had a lot of fun with both of these books. They were both 4 stars. Cirque Berserk, though, the more I think about it, might be a 5-star book. They are horror novellas, so all of them are quite short. They range from like 40 pages to 200 pages, depending on, you know, which of the 33 books you choose. And they're just very campy, very fun horror novellas. Cirque Berserk is about is a slasher that takes place in an abandoned circus. Camp Neverland has spooky summer camp vibes with witchy, dark witchy moments going on too. So those have definitely been the horror standouts. And then for fantasy, I haven't found like a true new fantasy favorite on Kindle Unlimited that isn't a fantasy romance, but I will say my favorite so far, and it did get 4 stars, so this is, you know, a very good book, and I'm excited to read the other books in this series. It's just not like one of my top favorites, is The Swordsman's Lament by G.M. White. I would recommend this book because, first of all, the story feels wrapped up in this one book. There is a prequel and a sequel, but it doesn't feel like you need to read either of those. And it's only 200 and something pages, which is pretty rare for a fantasy novel. So this is very, very cozy, kind of merges a fantasy and a murder mystery together. I had a lot of fun with the characters in this story, a lot of fun with the plot in the story. While it was predictable, it was still fun. I know that it was a lot to talk about. Future installments of this video will be less of me talking about all of these crazy amounts of books that I've read, because we're just checking in on the last 4 months each time, where this time we're checking in on like the last year and a half. All right, and let's see what books I currently have checked out. I will say, while I do have a lot of books checked out, I also have a list of, I think it's like at 120 now, of just Kindle Unlimited recommendations, a list on Amazon that I can just easily access on my Kindle here. I keep calling it a Kindle. It's not a Kindle, like I said, it's a tablet, but we're calling it a Kindle. So while I have these like 15 books checked out, there's technically like 120 books that I'm interested in. But here are the books that are currently checked out. So I have Glow, like I mentioned earlier. This is no longer on Kindle Unlimited. I downloaded it before it got off of Kindle Unlimited, so I am very, very lucky that I still have access to it. This is the 4th book and the newest book in the Plated Prisoner series, and I've really been enjoying it so far, and I'm excited to read Glow. That's probably one of my top priority books on here. Then I have Camp Slaughter. I was going to read this for Summerween, and then the first couple of books I picked up for Summerween were just not books I was enjoying, and I've heard Camp Slaughter got a lot of bad reviews, so I didn't want to risk it for Summerween and have my whole vlog be full of books that I was hating. However, I do still want to read Camp Slaughter because, you know, there's tons of books where people hate it and I love it, and there's tons of books that people love and I hate it. So reviews don't really mean anything for me, so I'm still interested in Camp Slaughter. This is, I think, another pretty campy, pretty campy horror novel. I don't know, I think this is like in between novella and novel length. I think it's about 250 pages. Could be wrong though. Teddy, do not take out my ponytail. He loves hair scrunchies and stuff like that. Like, he wants to take them out. He thinks they're new toys for him. It's very annoying. It's lucky that he's cute. Okay, Camp Slaughter is about a bunch of teenagers that go to a cabin retreat, and there's a cannibal living in the woods. A cannibal serial killer living in the woods. Sounds like a great premise. I'm still pretty excited for this. Then I have Hate. Is this just called Hate? The Madison Kate #1 book. I can't even see who it's by on here because of the Kindle Unlimited thing. Tate James. It's up on the screen here for you. I don't know much about this book other than that it's reverse harem. I think it's reverse harem. And I was like, okay, I'm sold. And then I have 24690 by A.A. Dark. And the only reason why I have this downloaded it because it was in a Facebook group that I saw that someone said it's like the darkest book they've ever read. And I was interested. I just want to know what it's like to read the book that is like the darkest book someone's ever read. Could be fun, I don't know. I'm talking about this and I'm sure people who have read this book are like, oh God, do not read that. But it's just downloaded on here just to see. I'm curious. When someone has such like a violent reaction to a book, I'm just always curious about it. So if you have read this book or even have heard of this book, let me know. I'm going off of literally a single Facebook comment about this book, and besides that, I literally don't know what the plot is. I have no idea. I just downloaded it from that comment on Facebook. The next book I have is City of Thorns, and this, I believe, is a fantasy romance, and the cover, first of all, I love the cover. This is definitely a cover download, and I think it's a revenge story, and there is a demon lord of chaos that is the love story between this girl and a demon, and they both are seeking revenge on this kingdom, so it sounds really good to me. And I think people have really been enjoying this series too. Then I have Sweet Temptation by Cora Riley on here. And I think this is a, so it's an age gap arranged marriage romance. And I downloaded it because it was one of the best sellers that was on Amazon. And I haven't read anything from Cora Riley's, and I know she's very, very popular, so I'm curious to try out her books. And then I have Song of the Forever Rains. And this is, I think it is fantasy romance, but from what I understand, it is also much more fantasy focused, possibly like the Play to Prisoner series and the Song of the Marked series, where while there is romance in here, there's also like this big, sorry, my tablet keeps talking to me. There's also like this bigger fantasy plot going on. The romance is not the only thing happening. So this is described as a dark romantic fantasy about a young woman finding hope in her powers of destruction. So yes, this is even described as romantic fantasy, fantasy being the key word there. And then the next book I have downloaded is the third book in the Ice Planet Barbarian series. Of course I have it downloaded. I need to continue. There's so many books in their series. I think there's like 15 of them. And they do all kind of read the same, so I'm just going through them really quickly. Like, I do not think this is a series that I would want to binge read, because if I binge read this series, it would feel like I'm just reading the same book over and over and over. But with like a month or two in between each books, they are all still becoming very enjoyable for me. And then I have Queen, which is the last book in Katie Roberts' Vampire Reverse Harem series. It's a trilogy. This is on my TBR for this month from my TBR game, which will be linked down in the description box below if you're curious to check out my TBR game. But this is one of the picks that I chose for that, so I will be reading this shortly. I'm excited to finish up this series. I will say though that this series, they've all been getting kind of 3 stars for me, book 1 and book 2, because it's just, there's not much plot going on in it. There's not a lot of plot. The next book I have downloaded is War. I mentioned I really liked Pestilence. War is the next book in the 4 Horsemen series. This one follows the horseman of war. These are not actual horses though. This is just like, you know, a man on a horse. This is not a centaur fantasy romance series. I heard War has some Khal Drogo vibes from Game of Thrones. I'm into that. We'll see if I like the story. These books are just also quite long, so that's why I've been putting it off too. I don't love when romances are like over 400 pages, and I think War is like 500 or 600 pages. And this is a good example of, yeah, there's fantasy elements, but the romance is the main part of this book. Like, you're reading War because you're interested in the romance, not because you're interested in this fantastical world. And then I have the first ZODIAC Academy book. I'm scared of this. I can't not read it because I have to read all books with any form of hype. But I've never read a bully romance before, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna like it because I don't love when characters are like really mean to each other. But if there's lots of groveling after them being mean to each other, maybe I could like it. But I'm also interested in this because there's a school setting, and I love school settings. School settings are my favorite settings ever. And I've heard there's cool magic in these books too. So school setting is what's making me still want to read this. And then I have Rhapsodic. I don't know anything about this other than that it's the same author as the 4 Horsemen series. And so I downloaded it. Yes, so there is this fantastical dude called the Bargainer. And this woman has been making deals with him for many, many years. And her arm is all tatted up full of all the deals that she's made with him because she has never paid her dues to him. And she's just been racking up debt, and this is magical debt. until one day I think he's like, okay, it's time for me to cash in on your debt. And basically I think he needs her to help save his people, and while they're there, they fall in love. This is a series too, and so I don't know if they even get together in this first book or not. I think it's a trilogy. Yes, it is a trilogy. So, and to my knowledge, it is a trilogy that follows the same couple each time. It's not like each book is a new couple. So I think this is like going to be another one that maybe has some more fantastical world building in it, and while the romance might still be a main part, I think there's going to be some cool fantasy elements as well. Then I have a deal with the Elf King. This has very similar vibes as the Rhapsodic book. This is by Elise Kova, and you might have seen this book. I think it was pretty popular. I think a book box might have featured it in there. And this says it's perfect for fans of A Court of Thorns and Roses and Uprooted, and I really enjoyed both of these books. And this is a standalone fantasy romance, which is also refreshing to see. I feel like fantasy romance definitely has the vibes of having a long series where the romance doesn't start until the end. And I do love a slow burn romance, don't get me wrong, I love that. But it's just refreshing to see some changes, and this is a standalone fantasy romance. And a human girl is married off to the Elf King, so that's all I really need to know, and I'm into it. Sounds very much like A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I'm always looking to replicate those vibes. And then I have From Below by Darcy Coates. I'm also reading this book this month. This is a water horror book by Darcy Coates. She normally does haunting stories, haunted house stories, so I'm very excited to see what she does with kind of a water horror book. And I think it's about a bunch of people that go down to a very deep part in the ocean and encounter a lot of problems down there. And the little premise at the top of this book is no light, no air, no escape. Hundreds of feet beneath the ocean's surface, a graveyard waits. Sounds really good. And the last book I have downloaded is Twisted Lies by Anna Huang. This is the last book in the Twisted series I have to read. I'm so excited about this. It's a fake dating romance. Love fake dating romances. So I'm super excited to see what Anna Huang does with fake dating. So those are all the books I currently have downloaded and the books that have been my favorites so far. In the future, I will just kind of talk about what books of the ones that I have downloaded, or what books just in general on Kindle Unlimited I've read since this video, so in 4 months from now. And I will talk about what books that have changed on my downloaded list. Hopefully 4 months from now, I have read a lot of books that are in my downloaded list and have other books downloaded, but we'll see. It'll just be a good moment for me to check in and see, do I read the books that I have downloaded on Kindle Unlimited, or do I get distracted by the new shiny thing? So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please go check out Melissa's channel, because she is the one that I was directly inspired by, and she has tons of great Kindle Unlimited romance recommendations. And if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe for more content. I'll see you next time. Bye!